Disappointments of cannabis space. Today, we are hosting a pretty unique and exciting event where subject matter experts from cannabis industry will roast Sorting Robotics. And that's why we call it a roast session. You may be wondering why Sorting Robotics is going through this kind of roasting session, and that too publicly. It's because we truly believe in receiving brutal feedback, learning from it, improving, and growing. Sorting Robotics is one of the portfolio startups that we onboarded in July 2023 program. They offer automation to the cannabis processing space using AI, computer vision, and robotics. I have Notal with me, who is the CEO of Sorting Robotics. I would request Notal to do a brief introduction, please. Notal.
Hi, everyone. So I'm the founder and CEO of Sorting Robotics. My personal background was in aerospace engineering. I spent time working at NASA, building robots that are currently on Mars. And then I moved from there into starting this company, initially in the e-commerce sector, and then in 2019, 2020, focusing on the cannabis industry and specifically building robotics for cannabis manufacturers. And we've been doing that ever since 2020. And I'm looking forward to sharing with you guys some of the things that we've been working on since then.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Notal. Really appreciate it. Marco, may I request you to do an intro, please?
Yeah, hi, my name is Marco Rulo. I'm an operating partner and venture scout for venture capital companies here in the greater Los Angeles area. Prior to that, I was the CEO and president of Pineapple Express, which is a chain of retail storefront dispensaries here in Los Angeles. And I've been in the cannabis space for about 7 years, having worked for some of the largest MSOs in the country. Founded three companies, exited three companies, have taken a company public previously, and have a background in management consulting and behavioral economics.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Marco. Really appreciate it. James?
Hi, my name is James Schwartz. I have a cultivation company, Cascade High, here in Oregon. I've been plant touching and growing this plant for about 25 years now, first in the medical market, now as one of the first adult use producers. Also have a master's in medical cannabis science and therapeutics.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, James. Really appreciate it. Mark?
Hi, Mark Ainsworth. I am a founder and CEO at Lowell Farms, based out of Salinas, California. We have been in the space now 9 years. So we went from pre-legalization into the legalization market, and we went public 2018 in Canada. So we've been do everything from cultivation all the way up to distribution. We don't own brick and mortar dispensaries, but that we focus on manufacturing and cultivation.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Mark. Michelle, may I request you to do an intro, please?
Yeah, hi. My name is Michelle McDuff, and I'm the VP of People at Jetty Extracts. We're a multi-state operator, a few different verticals based out of Oakland, California, also in Colorado and New York. I'm the new kid on the block for cannabis. Compared to this group, I've been in cannabis for all of 1 year. Prior to that, my career grew up in Facebook, now Meta, working with the talent sector for hardware products such as Portal and Oculus. And then I've been in the startup world for the past 5 years, working with companies in robotics, computer vision, and health tech. So happy to be here.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Michelle. David, may I request you to do an intro, please?
Yes, and my apologies for being a little bit late. My computer decided to update as usual. So perfect timing. But it's a pleasure to meet everybody. I'm probably the old guy on the block here. I've been doing startups for about 25 years. This is my 9th company. I've built a total of 9 companies, turned around 2 bankrupt ones. I've raised about $400 million from high net worth investors. I started my career as a startup guy, like a Bad Willie Nelson song. I started with $3,000, a bag of clothes, and a pickup truck, and turned that into $4 million and moved on from there. I was blessed to meet the right farmer who came up with 5 plant-based soaps to create a biosolvent to extract hydrocarbons from sand and soil and leave it so clean you could walk right in and plant vegetables in it and farm it after. So I'm now the CEO and founder of Clonetics, and Clonetics is an international company. We have operations in the EU, Israel, South Africa, the UK. Our genetics are all through the world, and we have about 1,600 different genetics that we own exclusive rights to in the international market right now.
Fantastic. Really appreciate your time, David. Okay, now it's turn for Northal to share his screen, talk about sorting robotics, and get some direct questions, brutal feedback from the panelist. Northal?
Cool. So let me share my screen. Cool. So today we're going to be talking about the Jico robot, and I'd like to just kind of go through a little bit of the background of why we developed the system in the first place. So the Jico infuses pre-rolls with cannabis concentrate using a method of injection. And the reason why we're coming to market with this, or we've come to market, was because back in 2020, me and a couple other traditional market guys got together and built a co-packing company actually in Oakland, California. And during that time, that was when I really like cut my teeth on the cannabis industry to to learn and understand what it was like to be an actual plant touching operator, from having a bunch of employees all the way to really understanding the nuances on the finance side, because we were running this thing for a few years. One of the aspects of that experience was back in, let's say, late 2020, when infused pre-rolls were not even really a huge market segment. They were very, very niche. We had customers that asked us to make the kind of fuzzies style pre-rolls, what they called them back then, because I think Jeter wasn't really a huge player on the game at that point. And we would take their pre-rolls, we would paint them with kind of watered down distillate, and then coat them in keef. And that process was so labor intensive and so messy that we just decided that wasn't something that we really wanted to go through. And we decided to go to the robotics side and say, okay, how can we think about this problem from a first principles approach, which is enrich the cannabis with concentrate material in a way that is way less labor and way less spillage. And that was the mindset that we built this system. And so we spent a few months working on it, and then in mid 2020, we went to market with it after doing a few test runs with our co-packing customers and even helping some of them bring products to market with this technology. And yeah, and we've been selling them ever since. So I'm just gonna kind of walk through what we have for like a brief sales sheet, and then after that we can kind of tear it up and see what's a place that we can improve on. So uh, this first slide is really just showing you the machine and then going through some of the specs. On the right, you can see the system is an infusion station, and it's actually built onto a table. So the Jico robot uses a heated reservoir, which you can see right here, where you can put any type of meltable concentrate. And the way we define that is it just has to melt at its infusion temperature. So this is important for things, especially like rosin, where if you're gonna get like a low grade rosin, you'll heat it up and it's not really gonna be mobile in the jar. But it needs to be mobile. That way it can flow through the system to be injected. So it's kind of a requirement when you're trying to use this form of technology. And then the second thing is that it doesn't have large crystals. And that's important because as the material is going to be moving from this reservoir through the circuitry into the needle, if you have a large crystal, it's going to just get clogged up inside the crystal, or sorry, inside the needle. and then it's going to reduce your efficacy and your accuracy, and it might even just reduce the precision to zero. So we want to make sure there's no large crystals. Small microcrystals is great, uh, and it's able to melt. And if you follow those two rules, you can infuse majority of the concentrate space. That includes doing CO2 oil, distillate oil, distillate, whether it's Delta 8, Delta 9, HHC. Then you can move into BHO products like sauce. You can do the batters because those only have like little microcrystals inside of them, batters or butters. A lot of people use it for HTE. And then you can get into things like live resin and then rosin. And that's something that we're really excited about with our latest product, which is the kind of next generation of the Gico Plus. Um, and that one is what we call like our donut maker version, where you'll put rosin inside of here. Instead of having just a simple needle to do the injection, you'll kind of split the aspects of the needle into two forms. One that creates a void, and it uses like a poker system to create a void inside of a pre-roll, and then an open-ended needle to fill that void with rosin. And then in that system, which is why we call it the donut maker, you can make hash holes. And it's a very clean, a very efficient way to making what is becoming a very popular SKU in the infused pre-roll market segment. So this is the overall kind of working system, and then you put all of your joints inside of this wheel, this kind of black cylindrical piece back here, and then you control all of it through this monitor. And one thing we're really proud of is that our systems are designed for very, very user interface. We have a lot of operators that they don't speak English. They don't really know what any of the parts of the monitor and the HMI and the human interface really do, but it's so intuitive that we train people who don't speak English all the time. And it doesn't take like a very advanced robotics technician to run this machine. You don't need to have like a machine whisperer to make it work. And then one of the most important things that we have found, especially that we found personally when we ran our co-packing company back in Oakland, which was the customer support aspect of having equipment is extremely important, and we take it extremely seriously because I was in situations where I had a labeler, or I had a packager, or I had one of these pieces that eventually went down, and I had to fill out a form on a website, or I had to send an email to a support channel, and I didn't get back to me within 24, even 48 hours, and it was just down. It was just down for a couple of days, and that was pretty unacceptable because I could just see the money kind of burning right in front of my eyes. So we decided that when we went to market, we were going to make sure that we had the enterprise level of customer support that me and my co-founders enjoyed in the aerospace industry, which was every time this machine has an issue, there's no support forum, there's no email, you're not going to be texting people. Every machine ships with a dedicated Slack channel where you can see my whole engineering team and my whole technical team, and specifically my customer support and technical support team. And you can see them being online. And then we can put any one of your teams as well. Obviously, the operators are normally on that Slack. Sometimes even the management or the production managers are on that Slack. And we guarantee a 15-minute response time for any issues that arise. So you hit us up on Slack, and instead of saying, all right, we'll figure this out the next day, you just take a smoke break and you'll be like, we'll figure this out, in 10 minutes or so when they get back to us. And it's something that we've been doing for the past 2 years. And I would say above everything else, it's probably the highest value because when you're buying these pieces of equipment, and I think a lot of the operators in the space have learned to realize that maybe you might be able to buy something from China for, a third or a fifth the price, but without the support, it really just makes that a big hunk of metal. And even with some of the customers stateside, or some of the companies, it's very important that that is a critical part of their infrastructure, because just building a machine isn't really enough. Because buying a machine is really you buying a partner, and that's what we would like to think we are. Uh, some cost analysis that people always have for the pre-roll machine. And here we actually compare it to doing the keeping style of joints, because that was our kind of core alternative when we built this system. And you can tell it's basically it's like an 8 to 10 to 1 when it comes to the labor to infuse, either if you're co-packing or maybe even doing it by hand. And yeah, it's the main thing we like to show the value on, straight up the labor and also the efficiency. We have customers on the East Coast that bought the system strictly because they weren't able to make enough infused pre-rolls using the Keef coated method in the square footage that they had. Because as you guys know, licensed square footage is extremely expensive in the cannabis industry. And yeah, I think that's going to be the kind of quick overview of the like top line. And the kind of summary is to the right, you can see the GCO built onto the table. Beneath, we have a nice electronics package, which hopefully no one ever goes into. The square footage aspect that we talked about means that the GCO is considerably smaller. It's not even the size of a fold-out table, only about 4 feet wide, 2 feet deep, and 5.5 feet tall. And you're able to do 800 pre-rolls per hour. And we like to baseline that as an average, because we have some customers that do 1,200 joints per hour, and then we have customers that do 600 joints per hour. But because this is an IoT device and we're able to take a like a fleet average, we like to just say 800 pre-rolls per hour as like an expected value. Like I wouldn't put 1,200 joints per hour, because although it can do that, there's a very limited number of people that actually achieve that goal because their operations are just set up such a way. And yeah, I think let's go into the roasting session.
Okay, thanks a lot, Nohtal, for the quick pitch. Are we ready to ask some questions? David?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and kick it off here. Natal, thanks for sharing with us. I'm kind of curious as to like what does your competition look like in this space? So what other, let's say, automation systems are there in terms of doing infused pre-rolls, or what's the current status quo for doing infused pre-rolls, and how does it compare to this? Is it done post-rolling like this process is, or is it done during that process? And how are you saving, time, cost, obviously, and then there's the spillage there. So just kind of touch on that for a second.
Sure. So I would say the most general infusion method is probably like a dry mix. So people will crush up THCA diamonds, or maybe they'll take bubble hash and they'll put it into like a tumbler and mix in their ground flour with the dry mix, either a keef, a bubble hash, a THCA. And that's kind of the most general way of doing it. It's probably the least high value way, which is why people look for alternative methods of infusion, because there's not really a guarantee that you're going to tumble all that material uniformly, and then it restricts you for the type of concentrates that you can infuse to only these like dry powders, which then can lead to like poor mixing. Um, and then there's also kind of in a similar same vein where they'll spray the flour. And so there's also an upper limit there where if you spray it with too much distillate, or if you put in too much key for bubble hash, it'll be so sticky that you can't put it in a knockbox. So there's like an upper limit to that method. And there's also concerns about uniformity. And so if you compare that to the GCO, you can really infuse with however much you want until it clogs, and it's like an unusable product. So that's there's no like really upper limit for the infusion, and then your ability to be consistent is much better in the GCO because you're kind of effectively dosing inside of the joint. So that was one part of your question. Should I move on to the next one, or do you have anything to add on that?
No, I don't. I appreciate that. I will have more questions, but I'll let some other folks chime in.
Oh, okay.
I've got some questions for you. So, because we're in Canada here, we have a massive international clientele. So we're one of the largest genetics players in all of Canada. We ship all over the world. So tell me like how this is going to be complying with IMC GAP for Israel. How's it going to be complying for EU GMP, for Australian GAP? Like, so if I want to go ahead and I want to take my compliant flower and I want to go ahead and I want to infuse it with your product, how do I know that I'm going to pass the stability test I need for Australia? How am I going to get it into places like Israel? Have you guys put any thought process into getting this certified with these different accreditations?
Yeah, so a few months ago, we started working on getting it GMP certified, and before the end of the year, it will be GMP certified, and that's kind of the steps that we're starting to take for especially Canada. Like you mentioned, we have a few customers in Canada, and the request for GMP certification is really driven by them. And then also, as Europe is starting to come online, and it's going to be a while until they get to infuse pre-rolls, is what it seems like. But for them, yeah, they're going to need things that are GMP certified, CE, UL certified. And so on the UL certifications, we're actually UL compliant, and then we're working on getting just the panels themselves certified, and then that way that's done in like a UL compliant manufacturing facility, and then we're popping those into the system. And so yeah, it's something that we've been seriously looking at and kind of moving down the process. So by the end of the year, we'll at least be GMP, UL compliant, and then CE will probably come sometime next year.
Okay, thanks.
I have a question related to, well, first of all, on your sales sheet, I'm assuming the first line in the cost analysis is labor cost.
Mhm.
It just says, so I don't know if you want to say labor in there because someone might, is that the concentrate cost or labor? The second thing is it's a little hard for me to understand when you say 800 infusions an hour, like, you know, California, let's say with all the meal break periods, you got 6.5 hour shift. Like, how many infusions do you think you can do in a shift? What, like, if you had a process flow document where there was setup time, an hour, 30 minutes, so on and so forth, to kind of show somebody in one shift period what they could possibly infuse? Because if you're looking at a lot of the machinery that's out there right now, like we use Corber Technologies, Howney, and we can in a shift easily produce 25,000 pre-rolls. So, you know, am I looking at one machine, two machines? And I can't easily tell that from 800 because it's, you know, there's, you know, is there maintenance every so many hours where things get stuck and you have to, like, you know, flush them? You know, is there an ancillary, you know, consumables or wear product list that you should always have 3 needles to swap out needles? So that's something to think about. And then the reservoir, like, do you need more than one reservoir? Is there a warming cabinet that you recommend to have alongside of it to keep it ready to go to swap out? So, you know, I just think you're going to have to help folks because you're in an industry that's going from manual labor into automation, and they're going to need assistance in trying to figure out how to get the best out of this equipment. Otherwise, everybody always wants to blame the equipment manufacturer, not that they haven't figured out a good process. So just something to think about.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that is something that kind of comes up. So we baseline, we say 800 joints per hour because I guess that's a major question that people will ask. And then kind of the follow on is how many per shift. And so we normally will say 5,000 per shift because of those like warm up and cool down and cleaning times and breaks. And that's because it's like discounting that 800 per hour over like an 8 hour shift. Um, so you
Yeah,
think
so
it
like
maybe even makes sense to put
yeah,
that straight up there?
for me, I would, in order to, like, if I want to do a one-to-one production off of one of my pre-roll machines to your infusion machines, I would need 5 of your machines to do one shift of production off of one of my machines. So just like you got to help people bridge the gap on what the investment is really going to be,
Okay, that makes sense to go one-on-one. Yeah, that sounds good. And then you also mentioned above and beyond like the amount that they can do uh per day and per shift. You mentioned one other thing that kind of made sense to keep in. What was that?
A process flow document, like kind of like,
Hmm.
you know, warm up your product in your vessel, and that takes on average an hour, like, with this
Yeah.
ancillary piece of equipment, and then so on and so forth. So that, is it one person operating and one person maintaining concentrates because the vessel size is X? Do you need more than one vessel? Like, do you have a spare parts kit ready to sell with the machine? Like,
Yeah, it actually
up
just comes with the machine. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, and then you talk about the Slack channel, but best in class manufacturing equipment has automated alerts to where if you have someone monitoring the Slack channel, you could make the piece of equipment fire the you know fire the alert to someone in customer support that could call them or right away on the Slack channel, say like, hey, you have a fault error in this component and you need to go to your spare parts kit and grab this component number 25 and replace it here. Like, super
Yeah,
high
we
end.
actually have that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
Well,
even
great.
a way that someone can click on the machine if there is an issue or if they have a question. There's a on the GUI, there's a little exclamation point that says, request customer service or report to customer service. And then that actually feeds into the back end and goes to Slack and it says, uh, oh, there's a report. So actually our customer service will ping people on the Slack channel and say, hey, I see that you have an issue. Like, what do you need? And then also it's self-monitoring. So if something goes down to zero in terms of health span, like let's say if you have a needle that's running out or the Z-axis lead screw needs to be cleaned or something like that, when that gets low, it also pings the consumer and then it pings the support channel on our side.
Yeah, I mean, today's day and age, finding service techs to come in and even fix like a simple kitchen oven, like they don't exist anymore. It's a dying skill set. So I think maybe even adding a complete slide on and embellishing more on the level of support you give. I don't even know what the list price of the machine is, so it's like it's hard to even say, am I being overkill, or I'm assuming not. But like, even saying that they're not alone and you're embracing that partnership a little bit more, I think would be helpful.
It's a good idea. Those
What
are
is the
good
list
points.
price?
The list price for the first unit is 120 grand, and that's the one that makes the donut maker, the kind of hash hole production machine. And then we have a standard version, which is 90 grand, and that's the one that will do basically everything of the hash hole system, infuses rosins and live resins and everything in between. But that one's 90 grand. It just won't be able to make the hash holes.
For that cost,
Nuttall, I think. Oh, go ahead.
for that cost, is that a year, 2 years levels of service? What's your re-up look on your SLA?
It's a 2-year warranty plan, and then it's a $10,000 renewal for those 2 years. It's 2 years or 500,000 dirhams, whatever comes first.
I'm concerned about your labor costs. So how big is your team now?
12.
Okay. Yeah, that's the thing that I'm worried about is it's going to be really difficult to scale that level of service if you've got, 500, 1,000, 1,500 machines out in the wild. And then you've got that cliff where everybody kind of falls off in that 18 months. And then half your CS team is left for the next big thing. Right. And so I'd really ask you to think about how you're future-proofing your team. That's my biggest concern.
Interesting. Okay. So you're thinking, what do you mean by the cliff after those, 18, 24 months? You mean like they just don't sign on anymore?
No, when they start signing back on and you're still selling, right? So you've got to
Mhm.
keep those legacy customers happy when you're kind of built your team around your scaling phase, right? So you've got those 12 folks that are built to service the number of machines that you pump out in the first like 24 to 36 months. Then you're essentially like layering those first 2 years of customers on top of your new customers, and it's a tough scale to make when you're training new CS people, when you're bringing on new engineers, and customer service representatives. I'm not sure what you're paying them, but they generally have a fairly short life cycle in terms of how long they stay with even like the best enterprise hardware companies, it's tough to keep them engaged because they're generally looking for the next big robotics product, the next big computer vision product, the next big thing, right? And so I would really like sit down with your team and kind of build out a succession plan of, okay, this is our team now. What does it look like in 2 years? What does it look like in 4 years? And kind of couple that with not only your growth, but also, if 50% of your customers sign back on for service level agreements.
Cool. Okay, yeah, that's a good perspective.
So
Definitely something that we thought about.
So I wanted to pop in. I have some high level, broad questions and getting down into some nitty gritty operational issues. So number one, it looked like you had on your sheet, you had raised 3.6 already. Just wanted to get an idea of where you've spent that money. It sounds like, one of my next question was you're going to be your cost per unit. And I assume that you're on your way bringing those costs down as you're getting more efficient. Then to get into some of the more specifics, it seems like the limiting factor to the number of joints that could be produced in an hour is based on how quickly the human can fill those drums or whatever you're calling them, where you're loading the 20 joints. Do you have plans for some sort of a machine that's going to load drums for you? Also a larger drum that could bring down or increase that efficiency. And then kind of one of my last questions was you had the joint dosing machine as 50 milligrams up to 1,000 milligrams. Well, we know that the largest consumer segment in this market is going to be rather new, naive users. Do you have a way of limiting that dosage to 10 to 50 milligrams instead of 50 to 1,000? You're going to have a lot of people end up picking up joints that they're not going to have a pleasant experience from if they're getting 1,000 milligram joints.
Okay, a few questions. So let's see. Yeah, we've raised a few $1 million to date. What have we done with it? Well, we've done a bit of R&D, learned ourselves in the cannabis industry, scaled to $7 million in top line, used basically all of that capital to do R&D and growth in the cannabis sector. And it took us about 2 years to figure out what we were going to do in the cannabis sector, because to be completely honest, until mid 2019, I didn't know anything about cannabis. I mean, I smoked it, but not. We were all like NASA research computer vision guys. So we spent a bit of money there, and then we spent money doing R&D and then bringing this to market, as well as a few other products that we brought to market. One of them being like a high efficiency pharmaceutical grade vape cartridge filling machine, which is kind of like outside of the discussion. And then also we've used some of that money to then go to market with our third product, which is actually another another infusion machine, but this time spraying distillate and then putting keef on the outside of it. And yeah, I would say we did that raise back in end of 2019. So um, it was about $500,000 in the beginning of 2019, another two or so at the end of 2019, and then in 2020, a small follow-on. 2021, a small follow-on, and then that's what kind of got us into the swing of things. And this year we should do about 7 million in top line. Let's see.
And
There are a
on
few
that
questions
seven,
there. Yeah.
on that 7 million,
Mhm.
what is are you running? What kind of deficit are you running?
We're not running a deficit. So last year we were profitable on a like GAAP accounting basis, and then this year we are actually like cash flow positive for the whole year.
Really?
And then we'll do at the end of this year of the seven, probably somewhere in like the maybe 5 to 750 range in free cash flow, and then on the accrual basis it'll probably pass the million number.
And your revenue stream, it's coming from these machines, but then the service agreement,
Mhm.
going back to, I think what Michelle had sort of asked about is, as you scale up your team internally, like what are your next key hires?
Oh, well, one of our next key hires is going to be another sales rep, as we're trying to continue to scale our revenue. So we're trying to always consistently get this like 100% year-over-year growth. So next key hires are sales, software engineering, CSM, another customer support manager, and then let's see, what's the fourth one that we're looking at? Oh yeah, another operations person. And I would say the customer support and the technicians, those we basically scale according to our growth, kind of what Michelle was mentioning, and according to like our productions. The great thing about running robotics companies is that we don't really need to make 10,000 units of what we're doing. Right now we have like 70 plus machines of these deployed. And so we're still in kind of these lower scales and our partnerships can still be extremely intimate because we're not even at 100 unique customers yet. And we've noticed that it really doesn't scale based on the machines. It scales based on the number of unique customers because we have some customers that have 3, 4 machines, um, but their kind of interaction with us isn't 4 times as much as someone who has one machine. It's more like maybe twice as much. So we kind of use that as our baseline metric.
Okay.
There was one thing that I
And-
noticed that I
Go ahead,
couldn't
Mark.
tell from the materials was you don't talk about diameter size, which you can infuse. So you just talk about how many milligrams. So like,
Mhm.
we do a 0.35, but it's a full cigarette, it's skinny. And when we've looked at infusion equipments like this, it's too thin of a pre-roll. So I don't know if that's something you can maybe put in there, like a tolerance chart on what the machine will infuse.
Okay, yeah, it's a good idea. Yeah, I mean, usually the lower limit is like 7.5 millimeters, and we usually baseline I guess Blackbird, the Roll Pros guys, they make those kind of like rolled style joints, and their smaller size is 7, 8, and 9 millimeters. And we've noticed that if you go down to the 6 millimeter range, you get a lot of EOI, like oil spotting on the outside of the
Yeah.
joint, and that seems to
They just
be
don't smoke well. They canoe a little bit.
yeah, yeah. So you need to kind of get in the center, and when you have a needle that's 20% the size of the actual joint, it tends to be just like it's not small enough to really get into that, like define a well center.
Quick question on what happens, if you've got 70 customers using these machines and all 70 are out of business next year and they're selling their machines for half the cost. How do you deal with resale of your machines?
Yeah, so when we haven't had anyone resell our machines yet, thank God. But for resales of the machines, we then kick off another customer service agreement, kind of uh, a bring up again. Or this is what we prepared. So if someone wants to have us reinstate their machine, we're actually going to go refurbish it. Let's say it's a very old machine, it's like not even on an update cycle or something. We'll refurbish those machines, we'll kick off a new installation and a training program, and then we'll initiate like another warranty now that we've kind of redone the machine. And right now we're considering doing that for about like $30,000. And it's mostly a protection for both the customer and us because it's not a toaster, right? It's going to be difficult for people to just learn without being taught how to use the machine. And we also want to make sure that their machines are not just entirely outdated, or who knows what someone did to the machine beforehand. And we can't really stand by a machine that maybe has been beaten up or doesn't even like work properly. So kind of refurbish those machines.
And can you just actually touch on that question I had about milligrams in your joints?
Yeah. So you're saying, can you go down from to 10 or 50 milligrams, correct?
It seemed like on your chart there that you were basing increments on 50 milligram joints. Is that the smallest you can go? Can you go smaller than that?
Yeah, so we've noticed that the accuracy of the deposition for concentrate at lower than 50 milligrams is not within our 10%. Because if you, let's say, trying to do like a 25 milligram infusion, you only really get 2 milligrams, and that's like a subfraction of a droplet of concentrate, and the lower end of the accuracy, like the tolerance, is usually 5 milligrams, which is why we don't guarantee the machine past the 50 milligrams of oil. It's mostly for consistency reasons. If you did 10 milligrams of just straight distillate, that would be like a sliver of concentrate, and we just didn't build the machine to go that low. I think there was I think you had another or Mark had
Yeah,
one other
I
question,
I
right? Yeah,
also asked
there's a
about, yeah,
list.
the drum filling machine. What's is there any expansion? And then, as long as you're going to touch on that, what's your expansion out of the cannabis industry into other more mainstream industries?
Yeah, okay. So, oh yeah, I think you mentioned that the speed of the machine is limited to how quickly you can fill the drums. So that depends. If you're infusing 200 milligrams, so what we normally recommend is 20 to 30% the flower weight of infusion, because otherwise, when you get past that, it might just clog during the infusion during the smoking process. And so, let's say people are doing 1 gram joints, they're infusing 250 milligrams. Well, that actually drives how quickly you can run the machine, because there's kind of a physical limit to how quickly you can push out oil without it just shooting out and making a mess inside the joint. And so if you're doing 250 milligrams in a wheel of 20, that wheel is going to take you about a minute to a minute and a half, depending on like the type of concentrate you're infusing. So during that time, the operator, and this machine is run by just one person, the operator has a lot of downtime, and they have a minute or a minute and a half of downtime. So during that, they're filling the wheels with joints, they're unloading another wheel with joints, and maybe they're even tubing them. So the upper speed limit of the machine is really how quickly can you shoot out the material from it and maintain a quality product. And that's kind of the upper limit. So from there, we never really decided to get into bigger wheels because the wheels weren't the limiting factor. It was the physical limits of squeezing out the oil. And then in terms of us moving into other, sorry?
My apologies. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. In terms of us moving into other markets, we've built quite a robust infrastructure to date over the past 5.5 years. And so we're currently exploring the life sciences market because there's a lot of fluid manipulation there, a lot of very kind of like precision-based dosing, picking up material handling. So we're exploring that market right now, trying to find out what is like a good application. We don't have any firm like paths right now, but we're currently looking to explore our product platform and see where it can be applied. And so we're kind of actually running that process right now. Ideally, end of next year, we should have either a a decided kind of path forward or even like developing a prototype for what we're moving into next. Uh,
So how many unique customers did you say you had again?
Right now we have I think it's like 55 unique customers and then 70 plus
That's
machines distributed over those.
across which geographic markets?
Canada and the United States.
All right. And so, like, what percentage of the market do you feel that you've penetrated at this point? Like relative to your calculations of market sizing?
Yeah, I would say we're probably at 5% of the market right now. And it's also not evenly distributed over the markets. For example, like Michigan is one of our biggest markets. We have 4 times the amount of machines in Michigan than we do in California. But the market in California is 4 times larger than it is in Michigan. So, yeah, I'd say we're probably at like 5% now, maybe.
So where do you go next then? Like, what's your market penetration strategy?
So what we notice our go-to-market and the best way that it's worked over the past couple of years is we find a market and we find the top 5 brands in those markets, and we spend a considerable amount of time and effort um, conveying the value proposition to those top 5 brands. And if we pick one of them up, then the bottom 30 brands will tend to follow. And that's what we
What
did
is your
in
sales?
Michigan.
Yeah, what is your sales cycle for getting that key account?
I would say on average the sales cycle is 2 to 4 months, and for getting those one of those key players, it's probably more like 3 to 6 months. Because when it took a while to figure it out in Michigan, and then Arizona seems to be our next big market, and it also took a while to get one of those key accounts. It was over 4 months.
So on the one slide that you had that was breaking down some of the cost savings, um,
Mhm.
in terms of that, do you have a clear idea that you can communicate to your customer as to how long it's going to take them to get a return to scale when they purchase one of these?
Yeah, like the ROI on the machine.
Right.
Yeah, so we actually have an ROI calculator on the website, and then we also provide our customers with an in-depth ROI calculator on their like on a spreadsheet where they can like type in their own pieces of information like their local market, labor, or whatever they pay their labor, and then their scale of pre-rolls. And what we've baselined is that as long as people are doing 10,000 infused pre-rolls a month, they should get an ROI between 9 and 15 months, depending on the price of those pre-rolls.
Okay. And then in terms of like your service plan, and what's the use rate? Like, so how much in terms of the person they're signing up, right? So this is
Mhm,
your ARR. And
mhm.
then how much are they actually using of that ARR? So what is your what is your profit margin on annualized?
Annualized profit margin on the company as a whole or on the like warranty
No, just
program?
on the service, on the subscription, on the subscription part.
Oh, on the subscription part, it depends, right? But on average, it's about 80% gross margin, and
And
that's about what is
it's
expected.
on the machine itself.
Yeah, roughly about the same.
And where are you manufacturing it right now?
In California. Yeah, we have a global supply chain that supplies us with parts and materials, and we're kind of all over the world. But then they all come into LA, and then that's where we do our quality control and calibration. And the machines that get built here by our technicians, it's the same technicians that then will go install those machines across North America.
How much
In terms of
redundancy
like,
do you have for
go ahead.
parts? How much redundancy do you guys have for parts?
We at least have two suppliers for each one of our parts, and that comes from just necessity. And we try to geographically separate those two because we have a lot of suppliers in India, in China, a few in Latin America, and several in Europe. And then we also have like a local supply chain, but there are more specific parts, like let's say the needles. So the needles, we have three suppliers for the needles, but they're all located in China. So it's just because the difference in pricing is so significant for these medical device parts that if you get one in China, it's going to be 1/5 the price of the exact same kind of quality and reliability as one of the ones that we get from Europe. And so we have suppliers in Europe, but it just would change the cost dynamic completely.
I
Do you
guess
have
one
a
of the sorry, just to follow up on that really quickly. When I'm talking about redundancy in parts and pieces, what do
Mm.
you specifically have in your warehouse for redundancy for parts and pieces? If I'm a client, as an example, I have one of the most state-of-the-art tissue culture cabinets, pardon me, in the world. That cabinet's main components are made in the Ukraine.
Hmm.
So, well, imagine there's no parts coming out of the Ukraine for these units right now. So,
Yeah.
we have to have redundancy. So the companies we deal with in Canada must have redundancy for these products. So are you sitting on a certain amount of actual parts and pieces at any given time? So something
Yeah, we
happens
sit
in
on 6 months of
tomorrow,
inventory.
you got
Yeah,
six
we
months.
sit on 6 months. Yeah, 6 months of inventory. And it's kind of like an ever-moving scale because as we sell more machines, it seems like we're like slowly continuing to like rack up more inventory, but it's just because of the amount of deployed machines.
Right.
I mean, seeing the lack of capital coming into the space, have you found that, or any partnerships with equipment financing for, or are you leaving that
Yeah,
up to your
several.
customer? Yeah.
No, we have four equipment financing partners um, that we've been using for the past 2 years, and we brought on a couple more recently for our newer system, which is more expensive. It's like a $200,000 system, but we found pretty good success with the few that we use so far, and then we're looking to expand that now. And it seems that at least on the equipment financing and debt side, I remember 2 years ago when I was trying to find it in 2020, although cash was a lot cheaper back then, it seemed like the debt in the cannabis space was extremely expensive. And now there's been this kind of weird curve where the debt has come down, even though the cost of capital has increased, because just the maturity of cannabis has become a little bit more commonplace. So there are more people comfortable with servicing that debt for at least on the equipment side. So yeah, we usually have a few options for our customers.
What's the average rate?
Uh, I mean, anywhere between 8 and 12%. And that's been pretty consistent this whole year.
So I think that we've all come across some infusion pre-roll systems. Who are your biggest competitors, and what do you think your advantages are?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess in terms of advantages, our main advantage is that we kind of built this marketplace or this industry on the injected infused pre-roll side. Like in 2021, people were like, "Why are you injecting the pre-rolls?" And we said because it's better and all these things that we talked about. And so, being that first mover and having that much scale always gives us this competitive advantage because we know what people are asking for next, while other people are just catching up. So in terms of the people catching up, I know that there's a company called Credence in Arizona who has made a machine that's manually fed. So that's a pretty clear difference between what we're building. Thomson Duke built another system that's very similar where it's manually fed. And and then let's see, there's another company called Xylem which built a system similar to ours. However, I actually don't know anyone that's using that system, as opposed to the other two that I mentioned, where I can pick out a few customers. And then VapeJet, I think, has been exploring going into this market, but I've sold to customers that have VapeJet systems, and they just say, yeah, like that machine's not really built for this. It's built for filling vape carts, and it's good at that, but we don't find any use for going to this section. And I would say a big separator between our system um, and those kind of competitors, either one, speed and the reliability of it, because there's also this supply chain issue that we talked about. So there's a company called Pre-Roll that's out of Canada who copied our system. And although they did a really good job of avoiding all the like claims in the patent, they are still, trying to figure it out. They're basically 2 years behind us when it comes to trying to figure out the robustness of the system and even the stability of supply chain. And that's something that we had someone come to us about. So I think just the maturity and the capability is usually where we separate ourselves. And as Mark kind of mentioned, I wish there was a better way to articulate that kind of enterprise level of customer support because I have customers that either use some of these competitor systems before and then move to us, or they're employees that were at a company that had our machine and then moved to another company that didn't. And I've had people tell me, the level of partnership and support is on like a different planet from us to other people, to other customers, and they usually find that as very good. It's just difficult to articulate that value proposition unless you're in it. It's yeah, it's like asking a blind person what purple looks like. It's like they never know, right? It's difficult to know. Did that answer your question?
I think James brought up the point a couple times, like asking you, can your machine become compatible with some of these pre-roll machines so it's like fully automated, so you're not having to to manually feed this machine. Have you had any discussions with any major pre-roll manufacturers about getting these machines to speak to each other and work?
Yeah, I had, and actually, there is one that we've partnered with over the past year. So, a company called Hephaestus, who sells the Aura system, we're becoming their North American distributor for that system, and we've actually built a bridge between their system and our system, and we also informed the development of their newest version. So that system can actually make blunts. It's like a pre-roll machine that can pack blunts, it can pack cones, and then it hands off from that system into the GECO, and then from our system, from the GECO, it'll pop into like a tuber or it'll just go into a bin. And so we actually have this device, and we actually call it MARS, the modular automated rolling system. And the whole idea behind that product line is all of the different products that we offer, we can stitch them together with robotic arms and a unified platform for the analytics and the control. And so, yeah, we took it very serious, and like now we're deeply embedded with this group, and that's something that we're debuting at MJ BizCon this year.
We have two machines of theirs. They're good. They're a good outfit.
Yeah, no, they're really good, and they're the most knockbox-like type system, which it seems like everyone loves knockboxes because they're just so consistently reliable.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, we've decided to partner up with them, and they like working with us too. So it's been a pretty good relationship so far.
Do you know what your competitors are selling their units for?
Yeah. So I would say the one in Arizona that's manually hand fed, like it seems like the manually hand fed ones are now at the $50,000 mark, and then or 40 to $50,000 mark one, and then some of the retrofit for machines, they're at the 60 to $70,000 mark, where they're like automated, but they're just like a reconfiguring of another machine. And then the pre-roll is at $80,000. And that's kind of why we decided to segment our two devices. So the standard version, which is the most comparable to some of these cheaper versions, is now 90,000. Still more expensive, but I think it's more expensive because it justifies the cost in terms of your lifetime value of the machine. And then our flagship model is still 120, just because it's now saving people the labor and the cost when it comes to making hash holes, which I'm sure you guys know, yeah, it's not insignificant.
Do you have a plan for what happens when your equipment financing goes away because enough of these partners go broke and leave people holding the bag?
What do you mean my equipment financiers go away?
So are people paying cash for your machines, or are they financing it through some sort of someone who's willing to finance their equipment?
Yeah. No, I mean they're financing, but what do you mean the financiers going away?
So when in more mature markets, when the price crashes and people can no longer stay in business, they're often leaving attorneys with debt. They're leaving accountants with debt. They're leaving security companies with debt. They're leaving and their other manufacturing or equipment suppliers with debt. It's pretty consistent across the industry, oftentimes because there's a lot of people jumping in that aren't actually business oriented,
Hmm.
and so you see a lot of downstream problems from say a cultivator going out of business, or a manufacturer going out of business because the market becomes so competitive. And what we've seen is generally that equipment financing goes away relatively quickly once people start to see that without getting paid up front, they're often losing money. Do you have a plan for what happens if people can't finance these machines?
So there are some customers that we actually directly finance with our balance sheet. We obviously don't prefer that because it's a little bit more complicated. Um, but in terms of our financing partners kind of going away, the finance partners that we have now actually work with some of our other automation friends. So Green Vault Systems makes a very large packaging machine. And even the Hephaestus guys, they work with the same finance partners. So some of the finance partners that we've worked with have been in the space for over 4 years. So I guess really since California legalization has occurred. Uh, and they don't seem to be going anywhere, and they seem to be pretty happy with a either lower than market average default rate. So,
I think you really need to pay attention to James's point here.
yeah.
You're missing the mark because I come from the energy space. I built 6 major companies in the energy space, and I'm telling you
Okay.
that when oil goes down to $28 a barrel, financiers go away, all of them. All the banks start calling their loans. All these small players start calling their loans, and you either go to Ritchie Brothers, which is the biggest auction house in Canada, and start auctioning your equipment off so you can pay these guys off, or they come and take it and auction it off for you. So I think it is a really important thing. Like if you look at what's going on in the US and California, yeah, it's the biggest market out there, but there's people going broke on the daily basis in California right now. We have operations in Portugal right now. Nobody in Portugal is paying attention to what happened in Leamington, Ontario with these 1,000,000 square foot greenhouses that don't make any money. They're all building 1,000,000 square foot greenhouses, and some of these greenhouses are going for sale before they even finish construction right now in Europe. So the gold mine of cannabis only worked for the first guys who got in on their public company stock here in Canada. Everybody else has been eating dirt ever since. So I can tell you, even though we'll make probably some of the better returns in this industry over the next 12 months, I can't raise $1.5 million to save my life right now. So I'm self-funding and everything. So it doesn't exist, even though we are making money. So I would pay very, very close attention to what James is saying.
So
Yeah,
what
and
time?
while
So
you
I guess
think
maybe I don't understand the time scale. What time scales are you guys thinking like that this is going to kind of run a cycle? Because maybe we just haven't gotten
in
to that part of the cycle, I guess.
so
You did in Oregon, you did in Washington, you did in California. All those states,
Colorado,
they're all losing money.
yeah.
Well, those are
So
the cycles on just like the boom bust cycles in the cannabis industry as like a sector. But some of these equipment financiers have been through those boom bust cycles because those boom bust cycles are like 18 to 24 months, right? So California's already run a few of them, right?
but
Where the
some of these guys leave these cycles. So to give you a perfect example, I did a $22 million deal with a real estate trust, a REIT that was backed by the BC Teachers Pension Fund out here. That deal was closed, finished, and the BC Teachers Fund came in and pulled their money, took it out of the entire REIT, closed REIT, done, finished, over, because they were invested in companies like Canopy. So I think what you need to understand is some of these guys will just leave the cannabis sector and go back to the other sectors that you're talking about and focus on heavy machinery. Like right now in the US, oil and gas is going through the roof. I'd way rather be financing a bunch of yellow iron and robotics for the oil and gas industry than I would the cannabis industry. So I think what you're counting on is that these financiers will never leave the sector, and or new ones will come into the sector. And I think there's going to be less and less of them all the time. I think it's going to get tougher in the US before it gets easier in the US.
Your financiers will be there until there's not any more money or until they've been burned enough times. So, you're talking about a 4 year and foray into this industry. I've been in legal cannabis in Oregon for 10 years now. And when the price of weed drops from 2,000 a pound to 300 a pound, people aren't making money, and it shows its way all the way downstream. And so, like I said, attorneys are left holding the bag.
yeah.
Accountants, all of these ancillary companies end up getting left with a lot of debt. And so while your financiers might be there now for this equipment, and it, you asked kind of about the cycle, it is that kind of 18 to 20 more 4 month cycle in almost every new market that comes online.
Yeah.
But Canada's a perfect example. They're a legal country. They're doing IPOs. They're raising tons of money. Canopy is almost broke. They bought the Chalice Brands here in Oregon. Chalice Brands is now selling off their assets to try and pay off debt. They're not even going to come close. I think they owe close to 10 million and their assets are valued at about 1.5 million. Who's going to be left holding that bag? The financiers. So if they're financing equipment and suddenly they're getting left with a ton of debt, they're not going to be around very long. And so I just think that you need to think about that when you're planning for how you're going to get people to buy units. And then if they've bought units through you, through your financing or your credit, that's going to start to affect you pretty quickly. So I just think you need to think about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I mean that's an interesting perspective. Definitely I'm gonna think about that. Yeah, that's huh.
Have we thought about leasing options in that note? Do you have a
Yeah.
leasing?
Yeah, actually we do. We kind of offer the machine in any which way people want to buy it. So when we first went to market, we kind of wanted to do like this robotics as a service sort of leasing option where we either sold the machines on like a flat rate with an option to buy at the very end, or on a per unit rate with like a floor on a monthly basis. Um, yeah, people hate that. It seems like it seems like yeah, people don't want to do that. And that's actually echoed in other industries for robotics because like doing robotics as a service, it's kind of like the future of where everything seems to be going. One, because like it stabilizes cash flows for CapEx providers, and that's very positive to VC backs. Um, but the customer bases, they really don't like leasing equipment. They want to buy it and then they want to have it and then keep it as an asset and in some cases even depreciate in the cannabis industry. But yeah, we don't see much traction on the leasing side.
We lease our
What
machines. We just got into the pre-roll vertical, and we're not sure if like what we installed is the right option. And so putting up that much capital up front seemed like a poor decision. I think we're on a 12-month leasing model, and I think you will see more companies that are a little bit more financially conservative looking to see that as an option, especially as the market is as unstable as it is, right? Like nobody knows what the next big thing is in 6 months, in 12 months, and it could render the equipment absolutely obsolete depending on who comes into the market. So, it may not be an option now, but I would really challenge your sales team to see if this is something they can at least get wings on in the next like 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, I would second that and suggest you really have some sort of a subscription model that includes a rental fee for the equipment, and you sell it based on the same sort of thing that Apple does, which is 2 years from now the next best unit is going to be out there and you're going to want that one too. If you have it into some sort of a rental agreement, hey, every 2 years we're either going to come in and do a complete overhaul on your machine, or we're going to set you up with the next unit, or something where they can see a benefit to just doing an all-out rental. And then as Michelle was saying, I'm in the same boat. I would, if I thought there was an opportunity for me with a new piece of equipment and that piece of equipment cost me 150 grand, but I could rent it for 6 grand a month, and on a 12-month contract, if I haven't really tapped into that market 12 months from now, I might want to reconsider whether or not that purchase was the best idea for me, and having some sort of a rental agreement where I know that I can just send this machine back. All right, it didn't pay for itself, but at least I didn't drop 150 grand or 120 grand or whatever your cost of your.
Yeah, I'm a fan of everything you guys are saying just over the past 2 years. It's crazy. Yeah, like we've offered that option to every single customer. Yeah, it might be possible that we're just not articulating the value proposition well enough, but yeah, it's been a struggle and people will yeah, kind of like fight us on that because like we're a VC backed company, right? So being able to get the stabilized cash flows, like our our breakdown of our revenue is like 80/20 transactional and 20% recurring, and that 20% recurring breaks down into maintenance. But we actually do have some machines that are deployed on a leasing model, but it's like it's less than 15% of the fleet, right? It's like a very small minority of like all the overall machines. So yeah, people it's difficult. And I think maybe you're right. Maybe they're just they have the cash now, and so why wait? And
I
maybe it'll
think
become
that
more
you could
relevant later.
I think that you could sell your service better if you show them why the market sucks and why it's a good idea to be on a subscription model. And I think if you can really demonstrate, hey, look at the market in Oregon, look at the market in California, look at the market in Michigan. Companies come and go. Do you really want to spend 120, 150 grand now on a piece of equipment that may or may not pay for itself by the time you're out of business, and
Yeah.
really demonstrate some true understanding of what's really happening in the market. And they might actually look to you and go, wow, thanks for saving us that money. So yeah, I think that Michelle brought up a great point, and that's where I would go to is how do I push people into that subscription market and away from that upfront cost.
Yeah, it works really well for United Leasing all over the US. Extremely well. I mean, the construction industry would come to a grinding halt without United Leasing in the US and Canada. So I actually have to run, guys. I've got a meeting, so I got to go make some money for my own company here. But as novel as that is in this cannabis industry, but I think you have something really cool here, and I think you've got a really cool team, and I think that what you're doing is, you know, if you add some tweaks and you listen to some people like that you're listening to here and some other people, I think you could do something really special. I think this needs to be one complete unit, so I can do my pre-rolls and my infusion and have two people work at it instead of 10 or 12. And I think the leasing model would make a ton of sense for me. There's a reason there's a new Mercedes in my garage every 3 years, because I don't want the old brand anymore. I want the new one. And so, although I do have a 53 Ford truck in that garage. So, but at the end of the day, keep doing what you're doing. I think you've got something very cool here. And if you take some bits and pieces to these extremely intelligent people that were on here today, I think you'll do just fine. So good luck to you, man. Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, David. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Okay.
Pankaj, how are you doing on time?
I actually didn't interrupt because I was seeing the passion on the face, on the comments. So we have exceeded on time, but if there's any final comment or insights or recommendations for us from the jurors, then definitely let's take them.
I mean, I'll end on
yeah.
Great job getting yourself to cash flow positive. That's hard to do in this industry, especially right now. So if you can continue to grow that, continue to be, as thoughtful as you have with your team and with your model, and as passionate as you are about the industry, you're going to do great things. So thanks for taking the time to share with us today.
Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah, definitely. Look, I think you have a pretty good understanding of your business internally. And if you keep the focus on the financials and maintaining that margin, but then adding in layers of like that sort of planned obsolescence, or shortening that upgrade cycle there, then I think that that's going to be beneficial to you. And then really whatever is going to create a more robust value stream. And definitely, as James is talking about, keep an eye on how, like, say the pre-roll category is really exploding right now. It's going to continue to grow. It's a really attractive space. And whenever there's something that's really attractive, a bunch of people rush into that space. And so what you don't want to have is a bunch of your units out there on the secondary market, right? Unless you can figure out a way that's actually beneficial for you, right? So if you have a unit that's a year later on the secondary market, right, what does that look like for you financially? Are you still going to go in and do a rehab on the unit, or things of that nature? So that's what's one thing to consider, because there is a lot of market compression, and the price compression, which is driving people out. So like right now, this year, Jeter is great. In 2 years, they might not be around. That's just the nature of the market.
Thanks a lot, Marco.
Cool.
Thanks. Appreciate it, Natal.
Thank you very much. Okay, who's next? Mark or James?
Go ahead, Mark.
No, I have an inbox full of back and forth with you guys anyway from early last year. I know we were looking at a machine. We were in a different point in time in the life of our business, trying to restructure some things, so we weren't able to move forward with it. But I know that we heavily vetted it, and our team was excited about trying to get one. So maybe that's a conversation we pick back up.
Cool.
Really appreciate that, Mark. Really appreciate that. Thank you. James?
So, great job, Natal. Anytime an entrepreneur has to put their idea in their company before a bunch of people to critique it, it can be painful. So you're doing a great job, and I think that you have thought about a lot of the things, and I think that we've touched on some of the holes that you might want to look at how you fill them. I definitely think that you need to look at what does this company look like 2 or 4 years from now, because I can tell you that Michelle started by saying she was a newbie in the market, but I can tell you a year in cannabis almost feels like a lifetime to a lot of people in this space. It's so nascent, and companies come and go so quickly that if you've made it a year, it's probably pretty good. But I would definitely look at what does the financing and what does the finances as a whole of the market look like 2 to 4 years from now, and how are you going to deal with machines that come back or companies that go out, and then again getting back to trying to encourage people into that more subscription rental model that I think is probably going to be a lot more productive, efficient for you, and how you're moving things. I think on that side of things, if you go to most of these companies that are going to have this money are either startups or rather new companies that have still startup cash, because most of the companies that have been in the industry for 2+ years are probably extremely cash poor at this point. And so another sales angle to why they should go into that subscription model is, look, this is a challenging industry. You should be sitting on your cash to deal with problems, not paying for equipment up front. I think that could also be something that encourages people into that more rental subscription model. But great job. I think it's good. And then I do think it's really important you figure out how to get some of those infusions down to less than 50 milligrams. I think a lot of naive cannabis consumers, and this comes from the nurse medical cannabis side of things, like a lot of naive people will smoke a joint and be extremely high, and the last thing you want is too many of your 250 milligram joints getting people over high and then them ending up in the ER. So I do think that you should figure out how to try and minimize some of those 50 milligram gaps.
Cool. Interesting.
Thanks everybody for the insights that you shared during the call.
Michelle, did you want to talk?
Oh yeah, I gave my my pep talk there. We're good. But if you find yourself in Oakland, California, I'd love to grab a coffee or something just to kind of talk through your people stuff, because this is the part of startup world where if you get the people really right, something can go in a way that you just weren't expecting. So if you ever have time, look me up.
Cool.
Fantastic. Thanks everybody. And Notal, I think it's very courageous to go in public, seek feedback, criticism, and insights. And I think you have done really well. You answered questions for almost an hour, and I think that's really amazing, impressive. So thanks everybody. Really appreciate your time, and let's reconnect soon to see how we can collaborate, how we can support each other, and grow the business together. Yeah. Take care. Stay safe.
Cool.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.